Alright, so I wanted to comment on this Katy Perry video. She's talking about some of her religious upbringing and some of the challenges that were there with her parents, and it prompted me to kind of just talk about just a little bit. For us Christians parents, it's challenging. It's challenging to think through, what you introduce to your children, what your children take part in, because sometimes the line is a bit blurry. And I wanted to just kind of comment on what she says and then kind of give maybe a principle that I think could be of help for us parents, and then talk a little bit about something else. So I'll just leave it for that. Hold on.
For instance, I never was able to watch MTV, or I didn't really know who Madonna was. And I couldn't eat Lucky Charms because it was too closely associated to Lucifer, which is the devil's name. Can't call it deviled eggs, have to call it angel eggs. Can't even call it the dirt devil vacuum, have to call it the angel vacuum. I mean, it was pretty intense, but I hope I turned out okay. I think you did turn out.
Yeah, so let me kind of share some things concerning what she said. So as I said, as parents, it's very challenging to think through what to allow for your kids and what, where to draw the line and say, no, you're not taking part in this at all. That's sometimes challenging. And one of the principles that I look to very often that is found in the scriptures is Proverbs 22:6 that says, train a child up in the ways of the Lord so that they will never depart. And it's important to understand that when you come to any book of the Bible, come to any passage, you have to recognize the importance of genre, understanding what the genre of the passage is. Genre means kinds, so there are different kinds of literature in the Bible. You don't read poetry the same way you read narrative. There's different ways of reading and interpreting those things. When you're reading case law, or when you're reading chronology, that's different than when you're reading the comics, right? When you open a book and it begins once upon a time, you make an adjustment in your mind. You intuitively make an adjustment because you recognize, I am reading the fairy tale genre. So what genre is the book of Proverbs written in? The book of Proverbs is wisdom literature. It's filled with wise aphorisms. A wise aphorism is the way things usually work in the universe. So specifically, in relation to the Bible, a wise aphorism is the way things usually work in God's universe. So the way things usually work is that you train up a child in the ways of the Lord, and they will never depart. That doesn't mean there aren't any exceptions to the rule. Remember, you don't claim that verse as a promise. It's a wise aphorism. Odds are, if you train your child up in the ways of the Lord, you will never depart, or your child will never depart. So I wanted to kind of bring that verse up, but also bring up, remember, it's not a promise. And sometimes us parents, we can go too far. And there's one principle I had learned years ago that my pastor had shared with me. And he's talking about, he grew up in Oklahoma, and he's talking about, with a child, let's say you have a big fenced out area, big corral, As your child grows, you want to make sure that you push that fence out a bit. You want to give them more room to grow, to flourish, to run. And the problem is with many parents is they end up not opening, not making that corral bigger. They keep it small. And eventually the child gets so tired of it, they feel so sheltered, or they feel so disadvantaged that they end up hopping the fence, right? So that's important. It's an important parenting tip to think through. Sometimes we're so fearful of what our kids can handle. We don't want them to be taken off into whatever. And at the end of the day, we need to trust God. We need to trust that God is sovereign, that He cares for our children, that He's guiding them. That we really believe that. And we need to make wise decisions, and we also need to be bold and give our children some room, some room to flourish and some room to grow. Now, that doesn't mean, you allow them, to do things that they shouldn't be doing, or you allow them to watch things that they probably shouldn't watch. But let's just take the idea of, not eating Lucky Charms because it has some kind of pagan connotation to it. Related to that is Halloween. We just ended Halloween recently. Pat Robertson, he's one of the head of the 700 Club. He got up on a few years back and said that Halloween is the festival of the devil. And my question for Pat Robertson and other parents that are trying to boycott everything with any kind of pagan connotation or pagan tradition is this: to what extent does something's evolution from pagan roots entail that its present practice is now tainted? You know what Halloween is about? Follow the money. Here in the United States, Halloween has become about candy. It's unbelievable the amount of candy that is sold for Halloween. I can't remember the numbers I had read recently, but it's an astronomical amount. Okay? Follow the money. That's what Halloween is about. Does that not mean, of course, that there are occult practices that take place on Halloween? Sure. Does that not mean that there's some sketchy things that happen? Of course, right? But Halloween here in the United States is about candy. That's what it's about. Kids dress up and they trick-or-treat, or they go to a church and they do a harvest fest or whatever it is. And, for some parents, they get very nervous. They won't allow their children to do any kind of safe Halloween event. They won't allow them to dress up. They don't allow them to take part in any way. So I want to come back to that principle, of the corral, I think that when we, for example, in the case of the Lucky Charms or the Halloween, personally, in my own view, is that's us, that's Christian parents not opening the corral, not making it bigger for kids to run and to flourish in. And I think there's a tremendous amount of resentment that I think that can come from that. Because in my view, I don't think that something is wrong simply because it had pagan origins. If we really believe that, you couldn't drive a Saturn, or you couldn't call Thursday because it's, those are named after pagan deities, right? So it's incredibly hard to be consistent, very hard to be consistent, and you're going to be called hypocritical very often when you try and draw this fine line where you say, okay, you can't participate in anything that has any kind of pagan roots to it, right? So anyway, I just want to encourage and challenge Christian parents. Yes, think through things. Yes, protect your child. Yes, make sure you don't go against your conscience. But could it be that your conscience needs to be reshaped? That your conscience is misfiring a bit? That your conscience has been shaped by a tradition that it doesn't have to be shaped in that way, right? Maybe that can change, right? So anyway, just wanted to comment a little bit on that. And thank you so much, and God bless you in the way.